In today's episode of Today in World War II, April 16th, Iceland declares its independence from Denmark. The first Lend-Lease food shipments arrive in the UK. The Royal Navy has a major victory against Axis shipping in off of North Africa. The Italians get a rare victory over the Royal Navy. The Soviets start their main attack against Berlin. And in Colditz, the Colditz Castle, the most famous POW camp in World War II in Germany, the U.S. Army liberates it. Let's get started. Okay, on April 16th, 1940, Iceland declared its independence from Denmark and requested that the United States give it recognition. This probably was happened because Denmark was currently occupied by the Nazis, and they did not want to be ruled under a puppet government, which is what the Nazis were going to install if they hadn't already done it by this time, considering they invaded on the 9th of April. But I just want to bring something up. Okay, so I'm recording this in March of 2025. And there's a lot of stuff in the news now about how our sitting president wants to make Greenland our territory, possibly even a state. Now, let's just compare these two things here, okay? Iceland, the majority of the population wanted to be independent from Denmark, okay? This was not FDR saying, there's lots of mineral wealth in Greenland. Maybe we should take it and have it become our territory. You see a difference here? These are Icelanders who live on their own island where they've lived for generations, declaring that they don't want to be subject to Nazi rule, whether that be by the Danish system that they've had for centuries. Uh, and then you've got right now, the population of Greenland does not want. There might be a very small vocal minority, but the majority of the population does not want to lose their sovereignty, and then nor do they want to break away from Denmark, the relationship they have with Denmark. So I don't know. Call me old-fashioned, call me crazy, but I thought the era of colonialism was over, where the Western powers just freely jumped on other countries, other territories that were could not be defended or could not defend themselves, right? What happened as Americans, where 50% of our population now thinks that's perfectly okay? I'm not even talking about Canada, okay? I mean, seriously, not even talking about them. Canada should never even be considered a 51st state because they're too damn polite. They would not fit in with what's happening in our country right now. Please stay polite, Canadians. And there's lots of us out there who don't want this to happen, okay? On April 16th, 1941, the first Lend-Lease food shipment arrives in Great Britain. And, once again, FDR was a visionary about this, being able to not look at the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law to find creative ways to aid a country that's being beset by a totalitarian invading force, right? And pardon me for drawing parallels to our time, but I wish that Biden had been as creative and visionary uh, as FDR was, because we needed to do the same thing for Ukraine and we didn't do it. We failed. And now look what's happening. But getting back to the Brits here and this Lend-Lease food shipment, as an American, I want to apologize, not for the food shipment, but I am sure that a lot of those boxes that the Brits were now starting to unload, they contain spam. I'm sure they contain spam. Okay. Now, look, I know that in the Hawaiian Islands, for example, they love spam. They have spam sushi. They have a whole bunch of spam things. But you know what? I guess I should be grateful for the spam deliveries because after all, 20 years after the war, 25, 20 years or so after the war, Monty Python would give right one of their best skits. One of the ones I love the most is the cafe scene where, there's Monty Pythoners in a cafe and they order spam and all the menu has is spam, 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 spam. And you got Vikings sitting there too. So I love it. So I guess, this was a unintended consequence, good side of spam being delivered in Lend-Lease. Now, on April 16, 1941, the Royal Navy has a huge score against the Germans. So Ultra was able to, Bletchley Park, the code breakers, they were able to tell the Royal Navy that there was going to be an Axis convoy near the Tunisian coast after sundown. There's about four German troop ships and a Italian ammunition ship, and it carried the 15th Panzer Division, albeit minus the tanks, and the Royal Navy attacked. The HMS Jarvis, HMS Janus, HMS Nubian, and HMS Mohawk. They attacked and they sunk four of these ships. And they also took out a couple, I think, three Italian destroyers, and about 1,800 Germans and Italians were killed. So massive, massive success. Because remember, that's a lot of munitions, a lot of troops that are going down, and Rommel couldn't use. And this beset him forever. And I just want to point out again, to quote Jan Brady in the Brady Bunch, Malta, Malta, Malta. Yes, I'm talking about Malta again. It was the key. All right, on April 16th, 1943, we're still in the Mediterranean, and normally I'd be talking about Malta, but Malta was out of danger by this time. But this was a rare victory for the Italian Navy over the Royal Navy. The Battle of Signo convoy took place. The Italians actually beat the Royal Navy. It was mostly a torpedo boat attack against a convoy, and they actually took out a British destroyer, the Pakenham. So listen, like in the Pacific, for example, the PT boats against the Japanese did not do very well. The Japanese pretty much took care of them. Case in point, John F.K., President Kennedy. Before that, I mean, his torpedo boat was rammed and sliced in half by a German, or excuse me, German, what am I saying? Italian. What am I saying? Italian. They weren't in the Pacific. The German, again, Germans. Watch. Boo! I tell you, it's early in the morning, folks. I'm recording this. Japanese destroyer cut that torpedo boat in half. So rare victory, like I said. Tactically speaking, it was a good victory. Strategically, there was no way this was going to affect the war at all. But you know what? Good for the Italians, I suppose. I mean, I'm kind of rooting for them because of them. They're going to be our allies here pretty soon. They just surrender a few months later. And on April 16, 1944, the Soviet First Belarusian and the Soviet First Ukrainian fronts began their final assault on Berlin. And Hitler comes out of his rat hole. Well, not physically. He doesn't go down. He doesn't leave the bunker anymore until his body is removed after he shoots himself in the through the chin into his brain. Hitler makes an announcement that any German troop, including the ones they impress they press the 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids in, if they flee in the face of the Soviet attack, they were to be arrested and shot. Or what they normally did in these situations was they string these poor boys up on telephone poles with a sign saying, "I'm a coward." So don't even get me started on how horrible that was. On April 16, 1944, the United States Ninth Armored Division liberated Colditz Castle. And that in of itself is not that big of a deal. I talked about this yesterday. What I wanted to do was put like a stamp on this and say, okay, we're gonna, Colditz now goes into history, soon to be forgotten, except for weirdos like me who like escape stories. But I will say this: of all the POW camps that the Germans had in World War II, the one they felt was the most escape-proof was actually the one that was the most successful camp from which to escape. 316 POWs attempted escapes from Colditz. 32 made it to neutral territory. 32 made home runs. That was amazing. By far, the most of any camp. And finally, on April 16, 1945, the Soviet Red Army launched the Battle of Berlin, and they were attacking the German capital from the east. This battle would rage for 2 weeks, and the city was absolutely reduced to rubble. If it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't bad enough that the Allies were bombing it every day now. The Russians coming in, the Soviets coming in and doing their attack and just leveling the city. So it was pretty much nothing by the end of the war. So that's it for today. It's a lot of stuff happened today, but I appreciate you being here.